Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of the DS Show. I am joined today by a member of the Salesforce ecosystem today. He runs his own successful Salesforce consultancy. Please welcome to the show, Shell Black from shellblack.com.
Thanks for having me.
All right, pleasure. Now, Shell, we got to connect a little bit, was it last week or perhaps the week before, where we did a little meet and greet, and I think we shared some good kind of insights across our two different ecosystems, Salesforce on your end and a planner on our end. And it was kind of interesting to see the similarities that kind of exist with the path that at least Anaplan on our end is taking, similar to Salesforce, and we had a great chat about that. And I'm sure we'll kind of touch on some of those things for our audience. But before we dive into some of that, for those that obviously may not know you, especially in the Anaplan space, I'd like you to go ahead and give a little introduction.
Sure. So Shell Black, president of Shell Black, Salesforce partner. So Salesforce .com software. From an introduction from a Salesforce standpoint, I got into Salesforce back in 2005. Found a consulting company that was just getting into Salesforce. And Salesforce in 2005 was only 6 years old. Salesforce was founded in 1999. So really new, not too many people knew about it. Um, One of my old bosses was the owner there, and decided, hey, if I want to make a career change, this might be the opportunity because I really had a lot of success in the past. That company was a Stadia,
Mm,
became a Microsoft partner, and I don't know if they're still around, but so that's how I got exposed to Salesforce. Worked for them for 2 years, did multiple projects for implementation. Actually got to teach the Salesforce admin class for Salesforce where we would lease us out as consultants to Salesforce because they can keep up
mm,
with their own instructional classes. And that's how I got really good at it. So I was traveling. I think I probably taught that class maybe 20 times all across the US, a 5-day admin
wow.
class. Then I got an offer to work for a financial services firm and they didn't have Salesforce. I went into withdrawal because I really liked the product, and I was a project manager there, overseeing reporting to the CEO, and a use case hit my desk that was going to be great for Salesforce, and I literally fired up a developer account over the weekend, did a whole proof of concept mock-up, showed it to my CEO on a Monday, and by Friday we were a Salesforce customer. So I was back in the
Wow.
Salesforce business, built out a bunch of functionality as kind of a solo system administrator for about 4 or 5 years. A lot of cool stuff. Really was a lot of fun
Mm,
to go deep on the product because a lot of times when you do implementations, you just do the year one and you're gone. You don't really get to see it grow and mature. And so it was really nice to go deep on the product. And then my CEO came to me and said, hey, we're not going to go any farther or wider or deeper. We've got too much of the company running on Salesforce, and that's it. And so at that point, I spun up shellblack.com, and that was not a business. That was actually my personal blog where I
mm,
was blogging about cool things I had solved for it with Salesforce and different use cases. And then companies started reaching out to me. And before I knew it, I had a side hustle going. And that grew really quickly. Within about 18 months, I converted full time to shellblack.com and started from there. So shellblack.com was my blog. I didn't intend it to be a business, but I kept the name shellblack.com ever since. So that's the quick story of how I got into kind of Salesforce and consulting.
nice. Now, one of the things that obviously we like to do on our Anaplan side is we like to kind of be thought leaders and give back to the community. And my team, we've all kind of written blogs, or we run this podcast, amongst various other things. Can you talk a little bit just about what giving back to the community, writing a blog, things of that sort, what it's helped you kind of achieve? And I don't even like positioning it perhaps that way because that sort of seems like it's selfish, but it has a lot of kind of benefits aside from just kind of giving back to the community.
Yeah, I agree. When I was with that financial services company, the community really didn't exist. It
Mm,
was a couple of personal blogs, it was a couple of people to follow on Twitter, and that was about it. And I was kind of taking cues from them of how to interact and get connected. The Salesforce community was very nascent. There's a woman named Erica Kuhl, Kuhl, who really founded the whole Salesforce community and developed the whole Salesforce MVP program.
Hmm.
And there was a community that Salesforce actually sponsored, which was more like an answers forum where you could go answer user questions.
Yep.
And I was active on that, and I was blogging heavily. And what Erica Cool was able to show from a business case standpoint is that the top 1% was deflecting so many internal cases for Salesforce that, hey, we should
Yep.
recognize these people because they're saving us service and support time because they're doing our job, right? And so the whole business case for the community was really like case deflection, that they would take support questions that Salesforce didn't have to field, and it was more credible coming from a peer. And we've seen that, and it was actually kind of a cue from the Microsoft community. I think they were really the first to kind of go down that path. So for me, it was a way to connect early with those folks that had blogs and were on Twitter. Um, and I also wanted to find my own voice, right? So you kind of, I didn't want to do what everybody else was doing. It was rewarding, and I'd done hundreds of answers on the answers forum and stuff like that. What really kind of um, made my name in the community was I started a video blog or video series on YouTube called the Shell Black Whiteboard,
Hmm.
and it was about 30 videos about kind of the basics of how Salesforce worked. And as a consultant, I found myself explaining these concepts to my clients over and over and over, right?
Mhm.
How do leads and opportunities and how do all these different things work, and what should I be thinking about when I'm building a business process in Salesforce or building out the data model, whatever. So I built a series of videos. I literally had a whiteboard where I would kind of sketch out a topic, and I would lead you through it.
Mm.
And this was all pre-Trailhead. So Trailhead was a learning academy that's completely free that Salesforce launched about 3 years after I did the videos. And so it was interesting. We were talking about kind of the YouTube traffic was just on
Yep.
fire. And
Yep.
then Trailhead came out from Salesforce where they were covering the same content. And this is where in is where you would go to skill up for free, get environments to do, modules and tests and get ready for your certification exams. And so I had 2 million minutes watched on YouTube, but then as soon
Wow.
as Trailhead came out, all that content kind of became redundant. But I was one of those great resources for people to understand Salesforce, to get ready for not only how to be an admin, but also to get ready to take some of the exams. So it's what I was known for. But I also did about back in the day, and I say back in the day, for probably the first 10 years of the company, we're a 15-year-old company now. I probably did about 125 blog posts as well. So it's just,
Wow.
and once you start creating content, it's really fun. You really kind of get in the groove, and it
Mhm.
gets a lot easier. Now, when I have to write a blog post, my director of marketing says, "Hey, I need a blog post about Dreamforce." It's really hard to get back in the
The
mode of
groove.
writing when you
Yep.
haven't been writing for a while. But that's how I connected with the community, and it's always been really rewarding. And then I'll go to Dreamforce, which is the worldwide Salesforce conference in San Francisco, and I can't tell you, there's probably a half dozen times someone's walked up walked up to me and
Recognize
said,
you.
"You're the
Yep.
whiteboard guy." Like, yes, yes, I'm the whiteboard guy.
And I think we share very similar kind of stories in that aspect. Because anytime I usually go to an Anaplan conference, like there'll be like a few people that recognize me either from the sign story or from kind of the similar work I did on the community where I was kind of answering the forums. And Anaplan community is significantly smaller, so I feel like like you're kind of always one or two people away from kind of the next
Mhm.
person, right? So you're not that far removed from kind of knowing everyone.
Yeah, and Salesforce really leaned into the community, so they created that MVP program. I was active. I was an active MVP for 7 years, and now I'm in the Hall of Fame, which is kind of putting you out to pasture, which is fine. Takes a lot of pressure off me. I still get all the benefits, but I don't have to be active. And it
Uh,
was really kind of recognized kind of the 1%. Today we would call them influencers. 10 years ago, 15 years ago, there were no influencers. But
mhm.
yeah, I look back at that fondly. That was a great community, and just the connections I made in the MVP program have been great. Some lifelong friends came out of that program.
Do you ever have any thought as to considering kind of going down that path further, perhaps becoming a Salesforce, part of Salesforce and maybe just being part of their official trailhead or just kind of doubling down on that? Or what about kind of the entrepreneurial path kept you going down?
Well, and like I said, when I got into the Hall of Fame, which is where they kind of put the old folks into retirement, and they opened the opportunity for new folks to become MVPs.
Mm.
it was really kind of a relief, and I could really focus on my business because that was growing and scaling and taking more of my time. And being a Salesforce MVP and you're creating content for a community is kind of like a second job, right, on top of your day job. And so
Mhm.
it was actually that, I mean, I miss it to a degree. I mean, I still get to go to all the events and stuff, but I'm not, having to crank out as much content. So I think it's, I mean, from an entrepreneurial standpoint, I look back on what I did and the accomplishments and the content that I created very fondly. But I kind of enjoy where I'm at now and kind of the phase of the business, and that's kind of jazzing me. So I guess I would say I don't miss it in terms of having
Mm.
the burden of like sitting
Content
sitting
creation.
sitting every week going, okay, I need content. What can I do for content? Because there's a
Yeah.
lot of pressure to do that. So it's been kind of nice to focus on the business.
Yeah, it's almost like you don't wanna let people down because 'cause they're waiting on the next thing from you, right? And it's almost like an internal pressure too. No one's forcing you to do it, but it's kind of like
Right.
you feel kind of like you owe it to community.
Yeah, because that's what you get known for.
Mhm.
For
Mhm.
sure. For sure.
Yeah. Now let's talk a little bit about the growth of Shell Black, the consultancy, right? So can you talk a little bit, where did you start? And then perhaps where are you today? Take us along for the journey.
Yeah, so it started back in 2010, 15 years ago, June. So just last month was our 15-year anniversary. And
Congratulations.
it's the day that I launched the website, right? And that's kind of the marker that I put in that it started.
Mhm.
Again, started as my personal blog, but within that first 6 months, I already had companies reaching out to me. I started adding contractors to help me with the work that was coming in by the second year. And I think by my second full year, I had 12 contractors working for me trying to keep up with
Wow.
what was going on. So it took off pretty quick. I still kept my day job for almost 2 years. And if you're bootstrapping a company and you're funding everything, it's you look back and you're looking at trying to figure out that inflection point where you pull the trigger and you go full time. And when you have a mortgage, a kid in private school, your spouse just stopped working, need health insurance, and you got to think about that decision pretty hard.
Mhm.
But finally got to that point where it made sense to go for it. It was a great decision. Salesforce from 2010 to 2020 was on fire. So we've talked about this. The growth was 20-25% a year. Over the last 20 years, I think they've done 60 plus acquisitions for growth. And for that first 10 years, as long as you were delivering kind of good, solid work, you grew with Salesforce. And it was a lot of fun. It was very organic, still 100% owner of the company. So completely organic, not taking any outside funds. Um, we did have a decision point about 2015. So about 5 years in, we could see that Salesforce is getting more serious about industry verticals. So 2015 would have been 16 years old as a company. So Salesforce finally
Mhm.
had matured to the point where they're like, okay, we're going to have product specific solutions for industries. So think in Salesforce products, that would be financial services cloud, health cloud, nonprofit cloud, CPQ for manufacturing, those type of things. And I looked at my portfolio of clients at the kind of the 5 year mark, and we had some density in financial services, probably because I worked for a financial services company for 4 or 5 years and I kind
Mhm.
of knew the lingo. And I picked a lane. I said, look, Salesforce continues to acquire more products. We're a very boutique firm. We can't be everything to everybody. I'd rather us be really good at something and known for something than just being average or mediocre at everything and the master of nothing. So it kind of freaked out my team, I will say, because we were taking anything that was coming at us. We had fractional jet ownership firms, we had deep sea oil exploration companies, and we had financial services. I mean, just a huge variety of clients. Um, Once we made that decision to kind of focus on it and change the website to be financial services focused, today, 10 years later after that decision, 95% of our clients are in financial services. I still have clients from 12 years ago that are not
Hmm.
financial services clients, but uh, today, active, meaning we're actively billing them. 95% of our clients are in financial services, and that's really kind of been our niche. And we even more super specialized, I guess, in wealth management. If you call up Salesforce and ask them, what are we really known for? It's wealth management. And we've worked now with over 400 wealth firms, including almost half of the Barron's top 20 RIAs, registered
Mm,
investment advisors. So 65% of our clients are in wealth management. So that's really what we're known for. But we do banks, credit unions, insurance, benefits, lending, that kind of stuff. So that's kind of the backstory on that.
nice. Now, as you've seen kind of the evolution of Shell Black, of course, Salesforce has evolved during that time too. And you mentioned the verticalization of it. Can you talk a little bit? Just you mentioned from 2010 to 2020. Now, how has it been like 2020 to present day?
Yeah, good question. So I said it was on fire, and then things changed a little bit. So right after COVID, it was really interesting. Work stopped for a little bit. I'm sure you saw this with probably your own practice or other people will kind of know this. Work stopped for a little bit and made us really nervous, but that was just people getting remote and getting functional. And as soon as they got set up and was able to conduct business remotely, all that business came flying back. And there was a bit of a digital imperative because a lot of small businesses realized during COVID they were not set up to work remotely. They were on networks that were in offices that were working on software that was based on a server that only worked in their office, and getting remote became again this digital imperative. And I'll just say we got body slammed with work to the point where it was like 8 to 10 weeks to staff a project. We were having so many businesses trying to get on Salesforce that week, that year. It's a
Mm,
huge spike. And then after that, Salesforce's growth started slowing down. So I said before they were growing like 20, 25% a year. And then they got an activist investor. And a couple of, I guess it was January 2023, they laid off 10% of their workforce. So I guess that would have been late 2022. Salesforce got an activist investor, grabbed a bunch of stock, put a lot of pressure on Salesforce and Mark Benioff, the CEO. They said, look, you can't keep buying revenue, right? So roughly 50 cents of every dollar of revenue was going to sales and marketing expenses at Salesforce. They were just
mhm,
buying growth. But they're 20 some odd year old companies. So the activist investors' argument was, look, you're no longer a growth company. You need to start making money. And they were just kind of taking the Amazon model, like just growth for any way they could. So instead of fighting it, they kind of embraced it and said, look, okay, we'll do that. So they laid off 10% of the workforce a couple of months later. Um, Growth, if you look at last quarter, what they're forecasting for growth is now 8% year over year, down from 20 to 25%. So a real retreat in the growth at any cost, right? So but now they're making money, right? So if you kind of look at net income, you can pull back the sales and marketing expense to get your net income to go. So they're just playing with the P&L to do that. That caused a ripple in the partner community because partners were growing as fast as they could. New partners were entering every year to try to keep up with this rapid growth, and it was the kind of a hot space to be in. And then the bottom fell out, right?
mm,
So when Salesforce slowed their growth, you started seeing partners shed talent. So Salesforce cut 10%, and I would say something probably similar cascaded through the partner ecosystem. And there are literally 3,000 Salesforce partners worldwide, right?
wow.
Yeah, a lot. Well, it's a 26-year-old product at this point, so it's a very mature ecosystem. Um, you know, decade or so ahead, kind of Anaplan. So and we felt that too, right? Because there's less deals, and what you had is more partners chasing fewer deals at Salesforce and it being very
Mhm,
competitive. So it was the first time in 15 years running the company, about 3 years ago, again, kind of that, or I guess it was 2 years ago, January 2023. Um, we really had some headwinds because Salesforce wasn't growing as fast. So it's just not as there was less deals that Salesforce could bring to the partner side, and if there's less deals, of course, we're a talent business, right? We don't sell
mhm,
products, we sell talent. And so there was a lot of layoffs on that side. And to give you kind of an anecdotal way to look at that, there's an agency that's called 10K that does kind of an annual report. And they said year over year from 2023 to 2024, last year, the number of Salesforce job postings fell 54%. So that means there's half as many jobs as they were a year ago, roughly, and more people looking for jobs than there are available. And we recently did a round of hiring for a single position, and we got 250 applications on our website and over 2,000 people applying through LinkedIn.
Wow.
So yeah, it was insane. We had never seen anything like it. And that just kind of speaks to there's just a flood of Salesforce talent. And there's not, again, with Salesforce kind of ratcheted back on sales, that cascaded back to kind of the partner community. The response for me a couple of years ago was go build a direct channel to your client, right? So absolutely going to work with Salesforce. We chase about 350 account executives at Salesforce that just sell financial services in about 8 offices across the
Mm,
US. And we've got 3 salespeople that are divided east, middle, and central, east, central, and west, and align with the offices with Salesforce. And we're in their office probably once or twice a year. We kind of rotate through working with a Salesforce account executive, still working with Salesforce like we always have, but we're also marketing direct our brand direct in the wealth management channel to not be as dependent. So today we're sourcing about half of our customers by ourselves to try to offset that decline in Salesforce.
yeah, and I think that if you just conceptually think about it, if Salesforce was providing you deals and they had to increase sales and marketing spend, they pulled back. I think you guys doubling down on that makes sense to kind of compensate accordingly.
Yeah, it's it took. We've been going direct heavily from our own marketing spend about 3 years, and it's taken about 3 years to really get that brand to break through in a channel, right? Just to be
Mm.
consistent, go to the events they go to, be present. Obviously, I can go into more secret sauce of how we're doing it, but or maybe I won't. We'll see. But it's been successful. But it took about 2 to 3 years to get where we could see, okay, we now have traction, and we're now sourcing deals based on that marketing spend. We have ROI based on that marketing spend. And again, it's just to offset that Salesforce has slowed down a little bit. Salesforce is always going to have deals. I mean, they're spending billions of dollars. I mean, they're a $34 billion company. I think it's the last. I think I had that right. $34 billion.
Mhm.
And they're spending, I don't know, billions on marketing and brand. So they're still getting the lion's share of leads, but we're also, working on our own to kind of continue our own growth.
Mm. As someone who went from bootstrapping, I assume you're still bootstrapping, in fact, to kind of having to navigate this new kind of curveball that you're kind of dealt, right? So how does someone in your position at the at the control center, how do you kind of navigate that? What does it take? Are you like reflecting daily? Do you have a mentor? Is it kind of you're figuring it out on the fly? Like, what's kind of your process there, and how are you navigating these situations
Yeah,
like
I
that?
think there's a couple ways to answer that. I think it's super helpful as an owner or anyone who's kind of C-level to have an external audience that you can talk to. So, and I've really felt that need when we were starting to have millions of dollars of revenue. I've kind of felt like, okay, great, you got to this point, but you don't know what you don't know, right? You don't know what's
Mhm.
around the corner or what you're not thinking about. And so, one of the ways I try to get um, some coaching is I joined EO, Entrepreneurs Organization. And if you have $1 million in revenue, you can apply to be part of that program. Great program, a lot of benefit to that. And one thing that they taught me, which I'll kind of explain here, kind of one of the values of EO is they call it the 5%. And so you can tell your company, your employees about 90% of what's going on. You can't tell them the top 5% of the good stuff, and you can't tell them the 5% of the bad stuff because you can't say the top 5% like, oh my God, I made more money than I ever had in my life. Can't tell them that. And then you can't tell them the bottom 5%, which is, oh my God, we're going out of business or whatever, or we're going to close this location, right? Or something like that. That's going to really bring the whole company down. And EO is that safe place to talk about the 5%, right? Where you need input on problems and growth and those type of things.
Mhm.
So I was in EO for a couple years. I found a good mentor in EO, and I ended up kind of going solo with that individual and have him as a business coach now to kind of meet monthly, prepare a presentation to him, kind of give him an update, and then I have some things that I want his feedback on. And really good mentor. He's gone through 2 transactions, sold his company twice. He had grown a $40 million practice on his first round. And so been there, done that. So I've seen a lot. So when I was in
Mm,
my EO forum, he was really kind of one of those standout thought leaders that I kind of gravitated towards. And then to your other question, or kind of another look at that is, as you know, an owner or a single owner, uh, you have to make really hard decisions, right? So if business backslides, you have to look at the productivity of all your team and go, who's not paying for themselves? We got really critical on human capital and people about 3 years ago, post COVID. And when I said we blew up, we got body slammed, and we were just getting more work than we could handle, competition was really high for talent, and we were taking people that were kind of job changers, like maybe there was Salesforce system admin for a company. I'm doing kind of internal consulting or internal business analyst, and we said, "Oh, well, that's probably good enough to make him a consultant. That's kind of close." Well, it's not very close. You know, someone that's been a billable asset versus someone who's been on a salary. And it was just we hired some people that we probably shouldn't have just because the growth was there and we were trying to just keep up. So we had to get a lot more serious about people selection. We ended up using something called Culture Index to help, and it's not the it's a data point of screening, right? To kind of
mm,
see, we had all our leadership team go through the program. We had all our employees surveyed to kind of see where they were. It's one of those kind of behavioral, where do you fit type of things
yeah,
and personalities, but and they give you a coach for that. But I have seen it to be 100% spot on. And we now have the discipline as we're hiring an applicant that starts the process. We will make them go through a culture index survey to kind of see where they are, and we know right away if that person's going to fit or not, or it just wouldn't be the role that they would be successful in. So that was a hard learning, right? Just trying to people selection, and then I think the easiest way to look at it is if you have some folks that are underperforming, and you can ask yourself the question a year later, would I hire them again? And if the answer is no, you know the right decision. They need to go, right? You're holding them back from being successful in something else, but they're not the fit. You've been with them long enough trying to coach them, nurture them, develop them, and a year later, if you're still like, no, I wouldn't hire them again. That's the peace of mind you should have to pull the trigger. So I don't know,
yeah, yeah.
hard decisions sometimes,
They
but
are, they are.
you learn a lot of good life lessons with those hard decisions, and you want everybody to make it. You want everybody. I mean, they're your children almost. You always want them to be successful. At some point, you got to put on the big boy pants and make some changes.
Yeah, one thing I believe is as the entrepreneur, you're kind of almost going to work for your team, right? And as opposed to the other way around in some cases. But there are points where you do have to make some of these tough decisions where, somebody's not working out. There's been some, in my experience, I've had some moments where, there were some people that clearly weren't working out, and those are kind of easy decisions. Other cases, it's not been so clear where they're kind of working out, kind of not. They're doing maybe just enough, but, you know, maybe they're not developing at the rate you would want, or yeah, and so I guess the question there is like what's kind of like the best HR piece of advice that you would have?
Yeah. One thing I'd like to highlight kind of off that topic is when we've evolved our comp plan, how we measure performance a lot in 15 years. And we finally got it dialed in where the last 3 years we've made zero changes. Our consultants feel like it's reasonable. A- and one of the biggest components, and this is something I really feel passionate about, is whether you made your numbers or what's the qualification for an annual increase, nothing is subjective. One of the things I used to hate, I used to work for big corporate America. I worked for FedEx at one point, and I was a director and had a team, and HR would say, "Hey, we have so much money for increases, and you're going to have to stack rank your employees high to low." And you're gonna disappoint somebody, especially if you have a team of all-stars. Like, how do you tell someone they're at the bottom of the list and they're all, A players, right? I just thought that was just a way that corporate America could hold money back from their employees and, not have to
Mhm.
pay it, right? And so I want everything to be in the control of the employee. So we have, I think, 4 elements of an annual increase, right? You hit your numbers, and there's some other ones that we do around, your certifications and some things like that. And it's a yes or no, one or zero, you did or you didn't. And if you want the full annual increase, you just have to hit all four components, completely in their control to do that. And then we have a monthly bonus structure for billable hours. We have some true ups that we do at kind of the 6 and 12 month mark. Again, 100% in their control. And the folks that, you know, and the feedback the last couple of years is they like is it's not subjective, and it's not stack ranking, and it's not where we had to sit down and do a big review. And if you've been with us 3 years, we want you on the bus, right? But we
Mhm.
also want to make sure you have opportunities and stuff like that. So that's the one thing I would say from a comp plan perspective is, from an HR perspective is, I want everything to be 100% in the employee's control and not subjective, so they're not surprised.
Mhm. Can you talk about a little bit about the importance of culture as it comes to forming your team? Because you mentioned more on the kind of the objective, like development, certification, that sort of thing, annual bonus. What about what? Where do you position kind of company culture, especially like in a consultancy? Where does that fit in?
Great question. How do you stand out in 3,000 partners if we're all doing the same thing, right? And I would say for probably the first 8, 9 years, I took culture for granted. I just thought everybody wanted to work for me. Why not? This is fun, right? And we had some core values. We didn't talk about it very much, which was probably the first sign we were hurting in the area of culture. We really weren't talking the talk or walking the walk. When COVID happened, and before COVID, we were all very networked. We knew who we wanted to work with us, past people. But as we got to the 10-year mark and we're really getting into some serious headcount, we'd exhausted our personal networks, right? We just,
Mm,
you know, and so we had to go find folks. And when COVID hit, and then post COVID, I talked about when we got body slammed, there was a gold rush that all the partners were looking for talent. And so, how do you stand out in the noise? And we went from not spending a dollar with LinkedIn on advertising for 10 years to within a year, we were spending $40,000 on ads trying to find talent.
mm,
We went from not having someone running, not having a recruiter to having a fractional recruiter. We went back and we said, okay, we're not going to have the benefits. We're less than 100 employees, so we're not going to have the benefits of a company like Accenture or Deloitte, where they have 1,000 consultants and they have the scale to have great health insurance and things like that. So we have 401k and 401k match, and the normal stuff. But how are we going to stand out? And we said culture is something we really needed to focus on. And so we and it starts from the top. Started with me. I looked at our core values and said, let's take a step back. Who are we today, 10 years later? Right. When we first start a company, have a website, this is what we're about. Like I said, we hadn't really seriously focused on that.
mhm,
And so we said, like, we're going to put it on the website front and center on the About Us page. And we've tweaked it once. We've gone back and changed a couple of words on that. And one of them is about kind of holding each other accountable. And we took a kind of a tip from Salesforce. They have trailblazers. We call them shell blazers. And we
mm,
went from spending kind of $0 from a marketing expense for employee recognition and programs, and we spend about 50 grand a year now on about a grand per head count. To We do a quarterly event, whether it's virtual or in person. We have a anniversary program that we award at 1 year, 3 year, 5 year, 10 year, and 15 years. Really exciting. I got folks now hitting their 10-year anniversary. At
wow,
their 10-year anniversary, they get 2 weeks paid, and we tell them, "Here's American Express card with two grand on it. Go take a vacation. We're paying for it." We just literally send them on vacation for 2 weeks and say we got it. So, and they
mm,
have to take the time off. We cover all their billable hours. We'll say we just give you a credit for your billable hours, so you don't have to put your billable targets at risk. Go. And that was just something that we evolved on. So it was something that wasn't our kind of guiding light, with our core values and our culture, to something that we are focused on. And it's the best money you will spend. It sounds maybe nuts to spend 50 grand a year on your employees on just recognition and gifts and events, but 50 grand is a heck of a lot less money than the cost of one person turning over in your organization.
Mhm.
And that's the way I looked at it and said, look, this is insurance. This is the way we can make folks sticky and want to be with us, and something we can do to differentiate from other um, partners, Salesforce partners. And we became very deliberate about culture, and it's been one of the best kind of business decisions that we did. But again, we took it for granted, and that was my fault. I own that. But for the last 4 or 5 years, we've really gotten pretty serious about it. If you go to our LinkedIn company page, or if you go to shellblack.com and you look at our, I guess, our career page, you'll see some of the swag and some different things we've done, and we've had a lot of
Mhm.
fun.
I think that's a great kind of punchline there is that sometimes we forget to have fun while we're doing what we're doing, and it's your people that bring the fun, and you got to celebrate all the wins too along the way.
Yeah, and it's hard to do when you're virtual. We're 100% remote workforce, and so we've had, virtual breakout rooms, magicians. We've sent art projects out, and we all did an art project together. Um, Gosh, we've done a charity event where we've done cards for kids in a hospital and sent those out. Just anything that we could do to try to get people together and just kind of not think about work, and kind of just enjoy each other's time and company. And um, we call it a pub quiz. We do that once a quarter on one of our team calls, where we just do trivia, and people compete ferociously about that, trying to win that. And we have goofy prizes, and it sounds kind of silly, but when you aggregate that over a year, people look forward to it and they get into it. And we've had crazy holiday gifts. We sent out ugly Christmas sweaters that were personalized with their face this big on it, and just all sorts of crazy swag. And so we've had a lot of fun, and I'm glad we're doing it because it's something we're kind of known for now. And I have a director of marketing that does a fabulous job, and a creative agency that does a fabulous job keeping the momentum of that program going.
And it sounds like what you said earlier, the culture piece, right? You were kind of looking for a way to differentiate yourself from the rest, and it sounds like you found a fun way to do that for yourselves.
Yeah, retention's been good. I think we solved a lot of that. I know you're never gonna be perfect, right? People are gonna find
Mhm.
different career opportunities and those type of things. And you got to wish them well when you find something that they think is going to be great for themselves personally, and that's great. But it's definitely helped, and I think we're all enjoying working hard together. We all work very hard, but we also try to acknowledge that work.
Do you have a favorite sort of HR story over the years that you kind of look back on and you're like, that one was a home run?
Favorite HR story home run? It's probably the Shellblazer program that we were just highlighting. I mean, that's just so unique to us at this point. Um, so I think that would probably be it. That and the comp plan. And I have about four directors of delivery that have kind of a pod of people below them that are in different teams, and they advocated for different things. And if it was reasonable and it made sense and it was measurable and non-squishy, right? No subjective, we changed it, right? So
Mhm.
we used to have these. I'll give you an example of how they changed our comp plan. So we used to have these kind of quarterly goals, and what people would do is they would take vacation at the end of a quarter and the beginning of a quarter, because if they took 2 weeks, and they would spread 2 weeks over 2 quarters, because if you took a vacation within a quarter, it would really knock them out of making a bonus because it was too much time off. And so we've figured out
Mhm.
a way through our comp plan to help load balance that, and let people take time as they need, and then they can, as long as they hit the end of the year at the number that they're have targets on, they can claw back any month where they didn't hit their bonus because they took vacation. So that was something that came out of my team. And it's kind of hard to explain quickly, but it's just a way for them to claw back a bonus and get it at the end of the year, as long as they hit their numbers, if they had to take some time off.
Now, last question here as we kind of look to wrap things up. Normally, I like to ask, if you have advice for someone else, but in this situation, I'm going to actually flip it a little bit where I say, if you were to look back at yourself when you first started, what piece of advice would you give yourself from the person you are today, the person you were back then? Is there anything you would do differently along the journey?
What would I do differently? Got into EO Entrepreneurs Organization earlier to have that kind of safe place for kind of business discussions. So just learn from others, from those experience shares where other people had done stuff because you're making decisions in a vacuum, and a lot of it's gut, and that can be dangerous. And we have Salesforce, which can measure anything, but you're still making a lot of decisions on gut and feel, and not necessarily sometimes on data. Um, I think I think getting that um, experience earlier would have helped, maybe accelerate us
Mm,
on kind of our path on scaling. We grew very organically, but maybe not as intentionally. Because again, Salesforce was growing, business was just coming in. We felt like we were doing the right things, but could we have grown faster had I known some things that I didn't know? So that's where I think probably that first 7 or 8 years into the business, um, you're just willing a company forward, and you're not, you're just trying everything, right, to make things grow. And so maybe that would have been more beneficial to get some coaching from other leaders earlier.
I think a lot of the guests that have come on the show, I think one of the things that's kind of I find to be a common thread is just the importance of mentorship. And I think it sounds like for you that was a big one.
Yeah, I guess another angle is there's about 8 different partners that I touch base with either once a month or once a quarter just to check in. Everybody's very open. Salesforce is so wide and deep, we don't hit each other, right? Again, 3,000 partners, the odds you're going to hit somebody, especially if you have a friend that's running a practice in a completely different vertical. It's just great to get benchmarking. For example, like how many salespeople do you have at this level of revenue, right? Should you have one, two, three, a solution engineer? That's really important, right? To kind of understand what is standard. What's how do you benchmark against somebody else? The last couple of Dreamforce conferences that I've been to, I've spent more time talking to partners than I did probably prospects, just trying to get an understand of what other partners seeing, and just so you're just not in a silo, right? Just not knowing where are you healthy, not healthy, is this normal, or are people seeing headwinds? If so, what are they doing? And just again, trying to learn from your peer group.
All right. Well, Shell, I think it's been a fascinating conversation so far. We've kind of dived in from your start, shellblack.com. You went from the blog to building up your consultancy, the verticalization of Salesforce, the big boom era that Salesforce was in, how you've kind of navigated changes to the ecosystem as things have evolved, and it looks like you've reached a point where company culture is thriving and Salesforce has matured, but uh, Shell Black is still running strong.
Absolutely. I kind of tell people like for the first 10 years, we're just like that awkward teenager that didn't know who they wanted to be. And now I feel like we're an adult.
Hmm.
We've
Hmm.
come out the other side with more, being a little bit more deliberate and intentional. But yeah, it's been kind of a wild journey to kind of ride, as you say, that wave of crazy growth with Salesforce, and now that Salesforce is kind of matured and slowing down, how do you survive the next chapter, right? And that's what we're actively navigating now, and it's still very exciting, still plenty of upside, still very positive and bullish. It's just a little bit different, ecosystem and environment, but yeah, really looking forward to the next challenges ahead.
I think one thing I just want to throw in for our audience too, is there any piece of advice you would give to somebody? Imagine like Salesforce back then, right? And people in the Anaplan ecosystem now, it's a little bit 5 to 10 years perhaps behind the maturity of where Salesforce is. For professionals in the Anaplan space, is there any piece of advice you'd give them as they're navigating their career through this time?
Yeah, and we talked a little bit a week or so ago, and it was amazing how the whole partner path has gone kind of a similar transition and maturity and evolving. I think you were saying Anaplan was hitting 1 billion in sales or something like that, and
Mhm.
that's a huge milestone. And it's a lot of fun to grow with a company that's growing, and um, I think that's the wave to be on, right? And it's I think it's really hard for people to understand kind of what's the hot next thing, right? So any company that has got $1 billion in sales has got critical mass at this point, right? And a good client install base, and it's kind of growing with that vendor in that space. So I mean, looking back, you kind of maybe 10 years ago, or maybe 10 years behind Salesforce, it's a very exciting window, right? So there's a lot of opportunity, a lot of market share to grab at this point. So yeah, those were the fun days. Those were the fun days, right? And you're just kind of riding that wave of, and I call it like, we're getting pulled along in the wake of Salesforce's growth. I don't know if we were doing a good job, bad job, average job. I felt like we are
Mm.
delivering quality work, but we were just growing besides yourself during that period of time because Salesforce was just so rapidly growing. So I think that's a great window, right? If you're jumping on a program that's got that stability and maturity of product and client base, and now it's just running that scaling. So that's a good window on that curve.
Yeah, and I think one thing you mentioned earlier was about just the Salesforce MVP program. On the Anaplan side, we've got something similar called the Master Anaplanner program. I think for those that have grinded through the journey and made it to the top, I think Anaplan is going to continue to be an exciting place to be, and even for the new Anaplanners out there, as kind of Anaplan looks to go to 2 billion, is kind of where they're headed. Hopefully in the near future here. And I think there's a lot of similarities. I hope the audience got some insight and value from kind of the parallels between Salesforce and Anaplan. And appreciate you coming on the show, Shell.
It's been a pleasure. Thanks for having me.
And Shell, where can people find you if they want to reach out?
Shellblack.com is the website. If you fill out the form on the website, you're going to reach me. Info@shellblack.com goes to me as well. It's kind of my anonymous alias, info@shellblack.com. It goes to my inbox as well. Yeah, if I can help, let me know.
All right. Well, appreciate your time, Shell, and we may need to catch up again in a few months.
Thanks so much.
All right. Thanks for coming on the show.